The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Rook.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and, well, what a show we've got for you tonight. But I will say, though, when I came into the studio tonight, empty bottles everywhere. God knows what those girls are doing. Introducing the Queen of Whiskey, my co-host.
I was so hanging this morning. I was hanging. I blame Gemma.
5 bags of empty bottles. Tell her.
Honestly, it was a real party. We had a proper party going on last night. It was awesome.
I could see that.
We didn't even have nibbles. We just had drink. Is all I can say.
That's it. Yeah, liquid lunch. I mean, God dear. I know you girls had a really good week last week, but, you know.
Well, they did. I had a great night last night, but it was Gemma's birthday, so we had a little party, you know, as you do.
And I didn't even get any birthday cake. That's
We
terrible.
didn't bother with cake. We just went for alcohol. Come on now.
Or where's mine?
Well, we drank your share because you wasn't around, so.
Oh dear. Anyway, so tonight's subject, we're going to be doing out-of-body experiences and astral projection.
Yeah.
So what have you found out then? Because I set you the task last week, so off you went with your research stuff.
I went off on a little poodle, and I found out quite a lot of stuff, actually. And it is, well, first of all, out-of-body and near-death experiences are very close. They're usually caused through an external force on you. So it could be a trauma or a medication or sleep deprivation or, you know, those kind of things. Whereas astral projection is a willfulness to do that. So that's the distinction between the two, but essentially they're the same thing, of where you feel that your soul leaves your physical body and you are aware of your body, but you are also aware that you're external from that you have this astral body, as it were. And so you're sort of existing in two planes at the same time. And both sides of things are very, very interesting. I mean, I've had lots and lots of varying opinions on this. I have a personal opinion on this myself, but I work from, as you know, guys out there, I work on a very spiritual basis. But when you look into it, when you research it, the work that's actually been done and some of the studies that have been done actually bring it more down to more scientific, like a physiological, psychological phenomena rather than a spiritual. But it's incredibly interesting when you start looking into it.
Well, I actually spoke to Stephanie, who's in the chat room tonight, and she actually wrote me a piece about her experience that she had. She said basically that 4 years ago she had a mix-up with a medication and she was rushed into hospital after she fell unconscious. And the first thing she felt was a feeling of being light. Mm-hmm. She opened her eyes and it was like she was looking down at the medical staff working on her body. So this is like an out-of-body experience. And just as she was comprehending what she could see, the only way she could describe it is like she blinked, and when she looked in front of herself, she see her nan and her uncle. They were having a long discussion. I'm trying to read it. I'm going along, so it's like. She said,
I'm taking it. A nan and her uncle have passed.
Do you know what? She's in the chat room. I don't think they're passed at this point.
Oh right, okay. So they're sort of like on the ground, as it were, with her.
Yeah. Oh, okay. She says her uncle was dead, so she could see her uncle and her nan, and they were in a long conversation. She said, "I was back looking at myself, watching the flat line on the monitor. Then all was black. My next memory is when the doctor was taking the breathing tube out of my mouth, and she was looking at her dad."
Okay.
So that was when she came around. So she basically, she was.
She basically.
Her nan was alive. Her uncle was dead, and she was above her body while everyone was working on her, and she could see her nan and her uncle both there.
Cool. Not cool, but
she did say, really good experience and first hand, I think. She did say though that her nan was a very religious person, and when her nan, I know her nan, and when she was ill, she was hallucinating, and she'd often talk to people that weren't there.
Right.
So whether or not she's a bit, not what was the word, bit like a medium, psychic, whatever you want to do.
Or just maybe those barriers are down. Maybe it's not being like a psychic or anything. Maybe those innate sociological shutdowns get removed when you're in that state. That you just become more open. You're not in a. You're just halfway between. You know what I mean? You're sort of sitting with nothing holding your mental state back, so you're able to tune in and see all dimensions, you know what I mean, whether it be the etheric or whether it be the physical. So you can see people that have passed if you believe in life after life.
I know that if you meditate, you can often have that out-of-body experience just by meditation. So it's almost
that leads you into astral projection, though, because that's a willfulness to do it.
Yeah, but it's not a conscious decision, if that makes sense.
No, but it's one of the states you get into. When we start talking about astral, there are certain steps you can do to induce this state within yourself, so you can leave your body willfully, and that's the difference. And meditation is actually one of those steps that you go through to astral project. Whereas when you're
said that in this instance there was a problem with medication,
it was a traumatic thing.
I think it could. I mean, if it sort of shut the body down, then it might have induced that sort of meditational state almost.
But isn't there a time where when the heart stops, the brain is slower to stop?
Yeah.
I think it's like a 20 or 30 second delay between when your heart stops beating, but your brain still goes. And then once your brain stops and then they restart your heart, then your brain will start back up again.
Yeah. Although they do say that the last thing to go when someone dies is the hearing.
It is.
So there's still brain activity. Mm-hmm. So the brain would be, I would have thought, the last thing that went.
It is definitely the last thing, as long as it's not a brain trauma, obviously. Yeah. If it's brain trauma, it's a different scenario, isn't it? Which is why the body will still function if you've got a brain trauma.
Yeah.
And then you get into the business of having to make decisions to shut the physical down.
We've also got Lindsay in the chat room. She said that she's done astral projection by accident.
Yeah, I can understand
more than that. Can you do something like that by accident?
Yeah, because it depends on the steps you're taking through. As I say, when we get into astral, it's a different ballgame because it's generally there are steps you take to get yourself into that state. But out of body / near death, because they're very, very close. In fact, when I was researching it, it just seemed to be one and the same. When they sort of class those two is exactly the same together. So like through trauma or through near death, you've passed and they're trying to work on you to bring you back, which is pretty much what Steph had. Those things. But I find it incredibly interesting. The studies, there have been studies upon studies done on this, and a lot of work, because they can't prove. I think the problem is we still haven't proved consciousness. You can't prove consciousness. We know it exists because we're all conscious beings, but scientifically you can't prove it. So you can't prove that if your physical goes, your consciousness lives on, which is basically life after life, right? And mediums, obviously are connecting with other people who have passed consciousness because they haven't got a physical body anymore. So because we haven't scientifically proved that point, it's very interesting to see some of these studies that have been done on out of body, because that's like the nearest point of passing, and then you get brought back. So people's experiences through this varied quite an awful lot, depending on belief systems.
Yeah, I do think the belief system does play a big major part in what people can experience.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the whole, some people, they experience just the floating above their body, as we've just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also get the whole tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And in the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think, it just depends on what they sort of believe, I think.
Which
Paranormal's amazing.
It is an amazing thing, and it does suggest then that it's a mental stimulation to help your passing easier.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because because the experience people have are so varied based on belief system, it does suggest it isn't a spiritual consciousness leaving your body. Not everybody is having the same experience, and not everybody has a nice experience.
I've just come up with a new theory.
Oh. Go on, hit me with your theory.
Blow your mind. Right, we was doing a show quite a few weeks back now on being reborn.
Yeah.
And you come up with the hypothesis that some people believe that when you die, you go through the tunnel and that's the birth canal.
Yeah.
Maybe, instead of that, when you die, or when your brain starts shutting down when you die, people say that the light flashes before their eyes.
Mm.
If that's the case, then maybe the last thing that flashes before their eyes is that birth canal experience of them being born. How about that for theory?
Okay. We would have to explore that further, I feel. But,
Yeah, I mean, when you die, they do say that your life flashes before your eyes. So if you're going to go back in chronological order, the first thing that you might remember is that being born. Which
would give you that light at the end of the tunnel thing. But that doesn't explain some of the other experiences people have had. That doesn't explain certain... It doesn't explain it all. It explains one aspect of what some people experience.
Yeah.
So Gemma has said, so are you saying you end where you began, Paul?
Exactly. The circle of life.
Oh, God, he's going to break into song in a minute. No, I have to say, with this one, it's an incredibly involved situation. I mean, don't forget, if you're going through a near-death or out-of-body experience, generally, it is through, as I say, we'll get onto astral projection, which is a different thing later on, although they're born from the same experience. One's willful, one isn't. Near-death, out-of-body, generally happens under traumatic circumstances, an accident, or... and when you think about the work that gets done on you, if you have a bad accident or an illness, and you end up in that state where you're having, what like Steph had on the bed where the doctors are working you, they're pumping you full of drugs. They're pumping you full of all sorts of things. They're working on you. Your mental state is in a state of shock, because your body's going through that. It's hard to process that. So when you start looking at it from a psychological perspective, anything to make that journey easier, whether that be making that passing over easier or whether or not it's just what happens, whether it's the sensory slowly shutting down, I'm not one to argue with that point, but I also, because I hit things from a very spiritual perspective, and I have a belief system in place that you move on, that you don't just, it's not just like dust to dust. And having had a experience, I wouldn't say it was near death, I would say it was a choice moment, then I think that there is something after you pass. And I think when you have an experience like your body's going through trauma, I think it's a combination of things. What you experience, I think, depends on your belief system. As I say, people have had great experiences in that state, but also horrific as well. And they've come out the other side and gone, I really don't want to go there when I pass over. I'm going to change my life because I'm not going down that route. I mean, some people have had visions of like the light, the tunnel, the light, saintly figures coming towards them, past lives people coming towards them, like nans and granddads and coming to meet them, that kind of scenario. But also you've had people that have had visions of a hell, a fiery hell and demons and, that iconography. I love that word. I've got that word in my head at the moment. I've used it 2 or 3 times recently. Iconography.
It's a word you can use as well. Say.
Exactly, which is why I'm saying it a lot.
Yeah.
that imagery of not being very nice, and then they're brought back to, they're brought back from that brink because the doctors have done their job and brought them back or whatever, and they've come out going, that scared the crap out of me. I'm not going to live the life I was living because it was wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's been positive in that way because they've changed their life. But some people have experienced a really euphoric feeling. It's a very strange, euphoric experience as well for a lot of people when they've had that experience. It's not been an unpleasant experience, you know what I mean? Even if they've seen their visions have been horrible, it's still been a positive experience. So it's one of those, isn't it? Is it or isn't it? Is it a psychological, physiological response? I don't know. I mean, one of the studies I found was that which I found incredibly interesting, was a study that was done by the University of Southampton, and they were talking about. They looked at a study regarding 2,060 patients, and this covered 15 hospitals, to have a look at these experiences in relation to death. And they came up with some really interesting conclusions in regards to that. And one of those was people that have inner ear imbalances.
Yep, I've seen that on the information that you sent me.
Yeah, and it was like it was a higher rate of people had an out-of-body experience if they had an inner ear imbalance. And I was like, I suffer sometimes with a problem with my inner ear, and it's like vertigo. It makes me go dizzy, and I can't. It's like seasickness. It's really weird. But I've not had an out-of-body experience with that. But I kind of was like, that kind of is quite interesting because it shows that the neurological patterns going on is being thrown out by this balance thing. And is it just a question of your whole brain is completely unbalanced? It doesn't know what it's doing, so it throws these experiences at you to try and help you process what your body is doing.
I think what you're saying is that everyone's unbalanced. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's pretty normal. Isn't being unbalanced normal? We're all trying to keep in a state of balance, aren't we?
Try juggle things about a lot, yeah. I understand that, and I did actually see a post on Facebook. I just vaguely have a recollection of it, but they were looking at things like the electrical impulses in the brain and the patterns it makes, and the iris in the eye, and some of the shapes that you get in the eye, and they were comparing it to things in the cosmos, and they were almost identical.
Yeah.
So maybe that's got something to do with it as well.
Well, if you think about it in terms of, when I work with crystals, it boils down to sacred geometry. So the DNA of the universe recreates itself, and that comes out in shapes and patterns throughout every organic substance. So if your body is working to that universal pattern, and for some reason it gets thrown out through trauma, through illness or whatever it be that throws that pattern out, it could be that mental signature is striving to readdress that balance and bring it back to the DNA patterning that's universal. That sounds very airy-fairy. It's quite a concept, but
it does make sense, and I reckon we should document that, and we should call it the Men in Black theory.
Now, Men in Black is a whole new topic.
Yeah, I think we should do that as well one week.
I agree with you, actually, because that's fascinating.
It's almost like from that article was saying before, it's almost like there's another galaxy type thing in your head. Mm-hmm. That's what they were basically getting at, I think, and because obviously it's the same. So we could actually be a figment of someone's imagination.
Oh God! See, you go matrixing and multi-dimensionally, and this is where it gets my mind gets like a little bit blown.
It's like the Marvels, Men in Black. At the end. Alien species playing with the galaxies.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't know. Anyway, bring it back to Tommy. The experiences people have on near death is quite a lot. Actually, the percentage is quite high.
Yep.
Relatively speaking, obviously, in regard to the studies, a lot of people have had this experience, and it's fascinating listening to the different accounts. But there's a lot of similarities in that. A lot of people see themselves being worked on the gurney or stuff like that, or it is so interesting when you see that. I mean, I wouldn't say the experience I had was a near-death experience, but it was, I suppose, it could be classed as that, really. Okay,
so what happened to you then? What experience did you have?
Well, that was when I was really ill in hospital, and I was like, on the verge. They weren't sure which way it was going to go. And I remember, and it's so vivid. I think that's the other thing with these experiences people have. It's so vivid to them. It's like, I remember the details of that precisely to this day. And as I say, I know I was in and out of consciousness at this time in hospital. For God's sakes. And I know I can't say that word properly, everybody. It's okay. It's just one of my things.
Where was you again?
I was in hospital. Not hospital, but hospital, okay? Yeah. And so I was in and out of consciousness, and I remember at one point I went to my nan's old flat, where she'd been passed for years at this point. But I was at the flat with her, and we was in her kitchen, just like we always used to do. And I was sat at the table, and she was pottering around in the kitchen, and we would. It was always that sort of time we would have those kind of like in-depth kind of convos that you have. And we was talking about the situation I was in at the time, and she was like, "So what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, over my dead body is so and so going to do so and so," and it was involving my children. And she said, "So you've made your choice then?" And I was like, well, yeah, because that's not, I won't allow that to happen. She went, then you've made your choice.
So your choice was to take them with you, basically.
No, well, yeah, if I could have, no, obviously not. My choice was then obviously to come back and raise my children for myself, not pass and allow somebody else to do that for me. But she really was emphatic about, so this is your choice. And I was like, yeah, this is my choice. It wasn't out of body or near death. Possibly near death, but I wouldn't say it was out of body. But whatever it was, because I wasn't looking at myself in the hospital bed like Steph had. It wasn't like I was looking down on myself. I was actually somewhere else. You know what I mean? I was in my nan's flat. It was a place I knew. So
maybe because of the way you believe things happen, it was almost like your gateway to the other world.
It makes me wonder if I'd chosen the other way, if I'd chosen to give up at that point, what would have happened next, as it were? Would the scene have changed and my nan would have then took me over? I don't know.
Maybe it would have been a case of like, well, you've got to go through that door then, and then you go through that door and off you're into the other world.
Possibly. I don't know. So I made the choice to come back. I do know that once she was emphatic that it was my choice. This is your choice. And I kept saying, yeah, it's my choice. I'm not going to allow that to happen. She was going, that's your choice. And I was like, yeah, that's my choice. And she was like, and then it kind of stopped. And then I went, from that moment, I started to get better.
Yeah.
Which in itself is quite strange. I mean, I know I also had musical ear syndrome going on at that time, so my brain was doing loops and crazy crap at the same time. So it could have just been a hallucination. I don't know. But if you want to look at near-death or out of body, I would say it wasn't out of body because it wasn't like what Steph had, like we've talked about what Steph had, where she was looking down on herself. She knew aware of what was going on. She could see multidimensionals going on at the same time, all that sort of thing, which is the usual out of body. When someone says I had an out of body experience, that's kind of what your mental image is that they're seeing themselves out of it. But the experience I had was definitely near death experience, if not out. It wasn't out of body, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to differentiate it.
On that a little bit more further than Steph did to get to your gatekeeper or spirit guide or whatever you want to call them.
Well, my nan. It was definitely my nan.
Yeah, but they can still be your spirit guide, can't they?
No, I have a difference of opinion on that one, but yeah, she was there. She was the one I would have spoken to about this sort of thing, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when you said like you wanted to stay, she was like, "Get out of my ass."
She was like, "It's your choice." She was so emphatic about it, making it my choice.
At least you had a choice, though. That was good.
Yeah. Whereas, like, I have to say, near-death experiences are out of body under the circumstances that Steph had. Your choice isn't there. You're either going to pass or you're not. That's actually not your choice. It's either your time to go or it isn't. You know what I mean? It's not a choice moment, is it? It's going to go one way or the other. You're either going to continue on that journey over, or you're going to bring it back.
Yeah. Okay, but Steph's just said that body was in Chelmsford and her nan was in Braintree.
Doesn't that make spatial awareness very different, though? Doesn't it? It makes it because if her body was in Chelmsford, her nan, who she was seeing, was in Braintree, but she was aware of herself on the gurney. It makes that spatial awareness completely out the equation because she's seeing something completely removed from where she was, as well as seeing herself on the.
It's almost like she basically was on the ceiling of looking down, but at the same time astral projecting to her nan's.
Gosh, she was doing everything, wasn't she, that girl?
Yeah.
What drugs was she given?
I
don't know. Sorry. Well, I'm not making light of that, Steph, at all.
But no, I mean, it's a possibility, surely. Wouldn't that though also explain the whole visitation when someone dies traumatically, being seen with their friends and family, like all over the place?
It does kind of bring that into question, doesn't it? Like crisis ghosts or crisis apparitions. You know, when you start look, we did I think a show.
That'd be looking at the same instance, but from a different angle.
Yeah, exactly. From the point of death, they're suddenly seen at that point in death. They're seen somewhere else, and that's verified through documents and stuff like that. We looked at that on the Dark Mirror show.
Yeah,
didn't we? One evening.
Yeah, the whole thing is absolutely fascinating. It really is. I mean, I've never had an experience like that. But then, to be fair, I probably wouldn't know if I did, because when I go to sleep, I might dream or whatever. But when I wake up, it's like instantly wiped. Don't remember anything.
Well, this is the other thing. Let's move it on into astral projection, which is the willfulness to remove your spirit from your body. And they talk about your etheric cord. It's like a silver cord that connects your spirit to your body. We'll call it spirit, or your etheric double to your thing. And you can, apparently, allegedly, you can achieve this. This is something that you can train yourself to do. It's not easy.
And it's like bungee jumping.
I suppose you call it that way. I suppose, you know. It's one of those terms that's easily bandied about, but it's not actually easy to do. It takes a lot of practice to do. And there are steps you do. Now, one of those steps is to get yourself into that hypnagogic or that mental state of not being within your body. It's an incredibly concentrated thought pattern. So it's a mental thing, right?
Yeah.
And you really have to practice that. Most people have trouble with basic meditation, so to get into this state, it takes an awful lot of time and practice to do. And then we get into the situation where you are in that state of your body is in its sleep state, but your mind isn't. And we've heard this before in regards to sleep paralysis, and we know what can happen in that state.
Yeah.
Don't we? You know, we've talked about that before plenty of times regarding hallucinations and the old hag syndrome and abduction scenarios that can happen when you're in that state. And then basically what you're doing is you're aware but you're not aware. And then you take that step to remove your spirit. And people have said it's almost like you go through, your body feels like it's full of pins and needles, and then you go into almost like a shuddering state, and it's almost ecstatic. It's almost like ecstasy, an ecstasy state, and then your spirit will leave your body. But this is when you're willing yourself to do this. This is a conscious decision to go through this process. And so if you're in that mental state, and that's the key word, isn't it? Mental state. I think.
Yeah,
so this is where it becomes a blurred line. Is it just a mental state, or is it a spiritual experience?
I think a lot of people will say it's a spiritual experience. I mean, I remember as a kid, and I've actually read this on a psychological page online somewhere, that when you get the feeling of falling,
yes,
and you're sort of like the half asleep, half awake type thing, and you get that scenario going on, and you get the feeling of, for me, it's almost like I find it like more like a panic attack, but you feel your body falling, or the ceiling's going further away from you, and then you're falling. I used to get that when I was a kid, and after reading this psychological page, it actually said that was a form of astral projection, but not being trained on how to control it properly.
Yeah, well, there is. But again, playing devil's advocate, everybody, there is, as I say, when you're starting to drift off to sleep, and I think we've all had this, where you literally are just on the verge of sleep, and then you go, oh, and your body jerks, it jumps, doesn't it?
I know why it does that.
It's a hypnic jerk, right?
Yep.
It's a physiological thing. It's just one of those things that happens. But when you've been in a deep sleep, yeah, because obviously you have stages of sleep, right? When you go into a deep sleep and you have that and you wake up, it has been suggested that it is where you're lucid dreaming or astral projecting whilst you're in your sleep state. And it's
that would make sense.
It's your etheric body coming back into your body, and it's that wakes you or brings you forward. So it depends, but lucid dreaming is a completely different thing. Now, in shamanism, there is a thing called dream walking.
Before we go on, the whole jerking thing when you're falling asleep.
Yeah.
I read that it derives back from when man was in early stages, and we used to like live in caves and things, and it was a body's mechanism to stop you falling off ledges and things.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's almost like the body feels that you're about to fall, and it will wake up with that judder.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So it's the same thing. It's just that obviously when your body's in a deeper sleep and the body feels you falling, you might not be falling, you might be astral projecting, and the body's response is that judder.
I think you have to look at the stage of when that happens. I think when you're just falling asleep, then yes, I would put it down to instinct, that DNA memory of prehistoric times, or pre-social times, when, we weren't as advanced as we are in this day and age. So yeah, I've heard that theory myself before. So I think if it happens when you're just falling asleep, then you can put it down to that's nothing unusual. It's a well-known physiological occurrence. Whereas I think once you've been asleep for a long time, as I say, it's a different ball game because your body is in that completely relaxed sleep state, and at that point, who knows what's going on? You're either in a dream state where your mind is sorting out crap from your day-to-day and a film you watched 20 years ago, and all of a sudden it'll bring, oh my God, I dreamt about mouldy bread last night. I mean, God, what the hell was that all about? You know what I mean? You're right. And I can sit there and generally, if I remember a dream, I can either, I can generally go, that probably links to that, or, and this is where you come into dream analysis and stuff like that. But if you don't remember your dream at that point and that's happened and you have that falling feeling, that is suggested that it is a state that you have astral projected in your sleep state, and it's where your etheric body hits your physical again. It's come back in. Now, I say, you look at shamanism, there's a thing called dream walking, and it's a situation where you can affect the physical world, but in your dream state. So you can interact, you can affect things in the dream state, but it's a very...
Don't be telling people that, because they'd expect me to do the washing up and things.
Yeah, I don't think you can do it quite like that. But you know what I mean? You can change things and manipulate the dream state, and what happens in the dream state manifests in the physical. But that's a very shamanic perspective, and I don't know of anybody that is... It's almost like a legend within shamanism that this can happen, but I don't know anybody that's achieved it.
So basically, because what you're saying is then, because I don't remember what my dreams are, I could basically be astral projecting every night.
Possibly.
I'd like to know where I went.
But you can do it without actually going into a dream state. Astral projection, you can achieve that mental state without actually going into a dream. You can feel and be aware and know it in a meditative state, which is not a dream state. It's a very different thing. And then people get confused with lucid dreaming as well. It's a very complicated field, guys. I'm telling you now.
Okay, so because you've mentioned it now, explain what lucid dreaming is. Go on.
Lucid dreaming is when you hit a dream state where it feels so real. It is like it's happening. It's hard to differentiate whether it's real or not. So mentally, you're kind of aware you're asleep, but everything you see, feel, touch, speak to feels so real. And when you're in lucid dream state, you tend to come across people that have passed and have conversations with, and this is where we talk about dream visitation.
Yeah.
You know, and things like that. But this is a lucid dream. So you are completely aware of your senses. You're completely aware of your surroundings and the people that are surrounding you. But there's still
that the one that you can control as well?
Well, this is where we talk about like the difference between dream walking and lucid dreaming. Part of your brain is knowing it's a dream.
Yep.
And that's the difference.
Okay.
It's the difference between just going with the lucid dream and then controlling the dream. And not many people are able to control their dreams. Again, it's a skill that you can develop. It is a skill that you can do, because with lucid dreaming, part of your rational mind is still always going to be there. This is from my understanding of this, obviously. Is always going to be, I know I'm asleep, but this feels so real. It's like real, but I'm going to go with it. And whereas if you dream walk, you know the difference between, you've deliberately put yourself into that dream state and you can control it. You have that complete knowledge that you are in control of this. Whereas generally when we're all going to sleep, we just like go with whatever comes, whether that be non-dreaming, dreaming, lucid dreaming, fighting people, you know what I mean? Whatever happens in your dream happens. Generally, there's no control there.
Oh, my dad
Excuse me.
The old kung fu in her dreams. That's quite funny.
But medical conditions can affect that. I mean, I have to say, my mum, bless her, she is suffering from Parkinson's, and being violent in her sleep patterns is very, very common. And she doesn't remember. She doesn't remember who she's fighting or what's going on in her dream state, but many times she's got quite violent in her dream state, but that's her physical body affecting her neurological patterns firing, making that happen. So again, there's a physiological, rational explanation for certain things that happen too. So it's an incredibly interesting area, but a lot of normal conditions can affect it. Medications can affect it. Sleep deprivation can affect it. Dehydration can affect it. You know, when you think about some of the things we study to do with the paranormal or go out on investigations, you know, when you think about some of the dreams you probably had off the back of some of those investigations, they could be misread as something that it's not. It could just be your brain linking lots of different films in with experiences you've had. You know, you've got to be very careful with it, because there are lots of rational explanations for it too.
Obviously, the common denominator is the brain, and I think if there's anything that can affect the brain in any way, would still have an effect on this whole lucid dreaming, you know, astral projection, all this, our body's experience and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a good field to investigate.
It's incredibly interesting, and it's really hard to pin it down, because what's to say that what Steph, and I'm playing devil's advocate, Steph, you understand if you're listening, wasn't just an hallucination through the drugs and the situation and the trauma that her body was going through. Who's to say it wasn't just a hallucination? You know what I mean? What I experienced, who's to say that wasn't a hallucination? I know I was being pumped full of drugs, antibiotics, you know, all sorts of things. My body was reacting in strange ways. I was having musical ear syndrome at the time. I know I was in and out of consciousness at the time. I had machines galore around me. You know what I mean? You just don't know whether or not those traumas are what's affecting you. When you
you'll never know unless you have one.
Exactly. I have to say, I can't explain that. I can try to I can try to apply some reason to that, but I still know what I experienced. It makes it a personal experience, because I can't prove it. No more than Steph can prove it. No more than scientists can prove it out of the 2,800 people they studied in regards to the people they studied. You know, these are personal experiences because we can't prove it. but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
No more than when we go on an investigation, we have a personal experience or an investigation. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Just because we couldn't capture it or we can't prove it. But all it does is it distills down to a personal experience. But when you have so many people having experiences, whether they be out of body through trauma, whether they be near-death experiences, whether they be astral projection, when you have so many people doing these things, it kind of opens up a hell of a lot more questions, doesn't it?
It does. And I do think, I mean, this is one of the subjects that parapsychologists absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, they study the brain and, you know, the reactions and stuff. And this is possibly like one of the things that they do investigate. You know, along with like mediumship and stuff. It's all connected. It's fascinating.
It certainly is. I mean, Steph has actually replied to that comment in the chat room. She said she had a conversation. I'm going to sort of think that I know where you're coming from, Steph. She had a conversation with her nan once she came out of hospital. But because she had that conversation with her nan was like, well, yeah, I was doing that at that time, and so that fits. Do you know what I mean? So could it be a telepathic connection then, rather than... It throws up a whole load of different situations. So she says, unless me and my nan were hallucinating at the same point with the same conversation. So obviously her nan admitted to having a conversation with her uncle at that time.
Yeah, at the same time.
That Steph was going through that experience. Steph witnessed it going through that near-death experience. And then afterwards, Steph said, did you have that conversation? Was you talking to, like, my uncle?
Yeah.
And her nan goes, well, actually, yeah, I talked to him quite a lot. You know, even if her nan's not experiencing her uncle in the room, she's just going, well, you know, I'm feeling like this, and how do you feel? And so they were actually, like, sort of having a conversation. It's a really strange situation, isn't it? It becomes a very in-depth point of discussion and opens up so many doors of what is it that happened and every experience is so personal. You know, Steph has her nan and her uncle. One we can't verify because her uncle was passed, but her nan, she had a conversation with her nan and said, did this happen?
She said that she joined in the conversation, so she was there at the same time.
So then you've got 3 dimensions going on there then. You've got a nan in the physical who's actually fine and dandy. You've got her uncle who's passed, and you've got Steph who's in between.
Yeah.
And all in different locations.
Yeah. How about that, eh? That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
The theories that could throw out, I'll tell you.
When you look at one not tiny, but one experience by one person...
And you get 3 dimensions out of it.
And you get 3 dimensions out of it. Then and there are hundreds, guys, out there of people that talk about out-of-body or astral projection. There are hundreds and hundreds of cases you can look into on the internet through this. And if you take them at face value, it opens up so many questions. And that's the problem, isn't it? And so we've even crossed into dream realms and hypnagogic states and hypnic jerks and all sorts of things we've looked at in regards to this already, and we're not even getting close to answers.
No, we're just like scratching the surface, aren't we, really?
You can't... Yeah, I don't know how the scientists can distill it down to make an experiment that would work in this scenario, because every experience is so different, and it cross references as well. Did you have this experience when you was like this, or what drugs were you on? You know, where was you? Where was they? You know, what happened here? And we've talked about, crisis apparitions in this too. It is so involved.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that they could even possibly investigate and test these theories out is if they had someone dying in a room on their own and them saying like, "Can you astral project to the next room and tell us what's going on in there?" And then the next room. Do you know what I mean? And that's possibly the only way they could do it, but it's going to be so hard to set up, obviously.
Well, yeah, this is true. I mean, I did actually find a site, and I don't know how relevant this site is. I'll be honest with you, I've not come across this site before, but the scientists, doesn't state which scientists, but it does say it was the University of Ottawa, found a lady that says she could astral project at will, right?
Yeah.
And so while she was doing this, they actually put her through a brain scanner, and some of the results were absolutely fascinating. It was, I'm going to read this bit because I don't really understand it, but we'll go with it. The fMRI, which I assume is the brain scanner thingy bit, showed a strong deactivation of the visual cortex while activating the left side of several areas associated with kinesthetic imagery, which includes mental imagery of body movement. This is the part of the brain that makes it possible for us to interact with the world. It makes you feel what your body's doing in relation to the world. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's the side of the brain.
I think what that said was basically that it shut off the bit of the brain that your eyes send images to. Mm-hmm. So you're not having an image sent into the brain.
Yeah.
But it's activated another part of the brain that can create the images anyway.
Uh-huh. And
that says to me.
Yeah, but this basically is saying to me that it takes the senses out of it and you activate a part of the brain that's not normally activated.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would make sense. And that could create the whole out-of-body or astral projection. And I do remember, quite a while ago now, this guy claimed that he can astral project to other worlds. And he actually met up with this alien and had a conversation with him and stuff. That was quite amusing to watch. I'm sure you could find it on YouTube or something.
Well, that links into telepathy, and we've mentioned telepathic interaction in regards to Steph's case. You know, people have said that they can get themselves in a mental state where they're telepathically interacting with something. You know, very careful, because I don't like the alien thing. If you listen to The Dark Mirror, you know this about me. An out-of-worldly situation. Again, I don't know. I mean, I'm very sceptical on that side. Or cynical.
Well,
I think I'm actually cynical, not sceptical on that one.
Yeah, okay. I'm the same, though, to be fair.
Yeah, but I have to say, the study that the University of Ottawa suggested that although she's experiencing it, and the scans are showing she's experiencing something, it still didn't mean that her soul is moving out of her body, is actually leaving her body. So they'll still say it's just like hallucination more than anything else. It's just an activation of a different part of the brain that we don't normally use. So again, it's
basically saying that the brain is making up those images to make you think that's what's going on. But like Steph's come along and said, well, actually, she was talking to a nan and uncle in the same room. Mm-hmm. She had the conversation with her nan afterwards, and it all turned out to be what exactly happened anyway.
I know.
So
how can you
that doesn't explain that part of the story?
It doesn't, does it?
It just opens up more questions and makes it even more fascinating. Mm-hmm.
As I say, when you look at some of the areas we've covered tonight, or mentioned tonight, it just, this is where you get a rabbit hole, though, isn't it, Paul? When you look, you go, okay, we'll talk out of body astral, and then you start looking at it, and then you start talking about it, and you go, oh God, this is like a rabbit hole, because we can go in so many different areas with it. And
that's it. You start the rabbit hole in Essex and then come out in Australia, China, America. You know, you've gone down so many different avenues. It's unreal.
It's crazy. And again, you've got two camps. You've got the spiritual and you've got the, you've got 3 or 4 camps here. You've got the spiritual belief system set in. You've got personal experiences. Then you've got the scientists. Then you've got, like, facts that are based up on statistics, which we all know how reliable statistics can be at times. I'm being sarcastic there, by the way. You know, just in case you missed that. You know what I mean? When you start looking at things like that and you start really delving into these kind of subjects, you kind of come out the other end and you still haven't got any answers, definitive answers for either argument.
No, I do think it's been investigated by the scientists as well. Otherwise, we had to come at statistics, but they're only halfway there. There's still that little block that they are never going to be sure of. So I don't think we're ever going to find out until it's our time.
I agree. I have to say, until it's your time. But I have to say, in this day and age, with the paranormal field the way it is, the amount of people when they pass who are going to, the first job they're going to do is, I've got to just go back and verify to my team that there is life after life. You know what I mean? On whatever gadget that's around at the time. It's going to be phenomenal. I can't wait for the future.
I wonder how many of those are going to be on Most Haunted 2050 and things like that.
No, I don't think. I think anybody who's in the paranormal field wouldn't actually hit a TV program. They'd go to their team. They'd go to their. I know for a fact I'd be coming on the radio going, you think you lost me, but you didn't.
Well, still do the ads, it's fine.
I don't know about that, but we'll see. Or maybe I'll be too busy. Who knows?
No, you're not. You're not going to be too busy at all. You leave Zach Baggins alone. I know you.
Well, open the Dybbuk box. Go back to last night's conversation. Just open it, Zach. You know you want to. Here we go. I've got a demon here. Its name is Kerry. And you lot will be going, we know her. That's really weird.
Terrible. Anyway, we're coming up to the end of the show. What have we got coming up for the rest of the week, Kerry?
Okay, so tomorrow evening, Penny is in the studio with Haunted Histories. She is talking all about Bobby Mackey. Now, her guest has dropped out. She has lined up another guest. I'm not quite sure who that is yet, but she is talking all about Bobby Mackey's, which is a well-known location in America. I think it's one we all know about, right? This is the one that is supposed to have a portal to hell in the basement.
Okay. I'll listen into that one. That'd be interesting.
Fascinating topic. Watch out, everybody, Friday night is all I'm going to say on this one. It is a full moon, and I do love a full moon. The
NHS staff.
Poor old NHS staff, definitely. So watch out. There may well be a pop-up about on Friday evening. There is a full moon, so who knows how crazy that will get. And looking at some of the lineup of some of the people coming on, enjoy is all I'm going to say on that one. And on Sunday evening, I've got the lovely Claire Hinks and Jamie Crashter in the studio. We're talking all about the Ark of the Covenant. Convenant, as it reads. But I'm going to say Covenant, because that's how I roll.
Yeah, it's on Oak Island. I know about that one.
Don't forget, guys, last chances. We have a competition running on the Parasearch Radio group page for 4 back copies of the UK Haunted magazine. So go over there. You need to be a liker of the page. Just pop your name in the comments to be part of that draw. That gets drawn live on air on the Haunted Histories show tomorrow evening. So don't forget about that one. Okay? And we have a YouTube channel. If you miss any of our shows, they all go over onto YouTube. All our archive is over there, as well as all the latest shows. So don't forget, if you find the archive Parasearch Radio or the Parasearch Radio site on YouTube, click like, share and subscribe.
Yeah, and what are we doing next week, Kerry?
What are we talking about next week?
Yeah.
Well, Next week, we have the lovely Alex S. King in the studio, madcap man that he is, and Daryl Marston from the Paranormal Warehouse. That's the, the American ghost hunting show. They do their own show over there. They're completely bonkers. Brilliant guys, lots and lots of fun are on the show next week. I might be late, just saying.
No, you're not allowed to be late. You've got to be early next week.
Oh, well, I may well be late, so just putting that out
your
there.
wages, telling you.
You might have to next week. So you're gonna have to run the studio for yourself next week, my lovely. And I'm gonna just jump in when I'm here, when I get back.
Okay.
I might be on time. Who knows? We'll see.
If they're that bonkers, I might need help.
You may well need help, yeah. But as I say, I might be late. Just little nudge on the reminder there.
Not a problem. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining us in the chat room. It's been a great show as always. So I think that's everything. So good night from me.
And it's good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.